Hey designers, welcome back to the studio. We've been in the computer now for about a week or so and really kind of getting bogged down in some difficult digital work, right? Practicing that pen tool, figuring out how the program works, how Adobe Illustrator's got a lot of sort of complicated new languages to learn. Let's pause the computer for a little bit and we'll actually go back to our sketchbook. The biggest reason we're going to do that is most of what we're going to learn sort of has its roots there, even if it sort of jumps into the digital world for a little bit. But honestly, all of the digital tools are based on, some of what we're doing in here anyway. So why don't we actually revisit our cut paper designs and we'll practice some decidedly non-digital stuff. The first thing that we'll do today is we'll actually get into doing a bit of tracing work and reproductions. We're going to work in multiples and we're going to work in iterations. We'll come back to this one later on in the week, but this time we're actually going to start to work with symmetrical designs, symmetry as an organizing principle, and another form of reproduction, or what we might call proofing. For this, we're going to need a little bit of our designer's vellum and some tape. It doesn't have to be this blue painter's tape, it could be any kind of tape you have around. And we'll also use this Sharpie pen from your art kit. Now the tracing paper we're going to use is not actually tracing paper, it's called designer's vellum, and you'll find that in your folder full of papers. You have two sheets of designer's vellum. One of them is printed with a blue grid, and the other one should be just clear on both sides. You know that it's the designer's vellum because it has kind of a high-pitched sound to it, and if you hold your hand up behind it, you can just about almost see through it. Now we'll use the design that you have glued down into your sketchbook for this experiment, and what we're going to do is do 3 or 4 iterations of your design. Now if your design is too big, you can't fit it all onto one sheet, then choose a small section of it. Just make sure that as you're reproducing it, you choose the exact same section. Now, one of the most frustrating things about doing sort of traced reproductions is that if your tracing paper moves at all, your whole design gets kind of goofed. The simple solution to that would be a little bit of this blue painter's tape. Now, this technique will start to look and feel and sound a little familiar, especially since we were just working in Illustrator where you could lock a layer. Well, a little bit of blue tape is very much like locking a layer. I'm going to make sure that I have enough room to do another design over here on the right and carefully tape down my vellum so that it doesn't walk away from me. 1 or 2 pieces of tape should be all that you need. Your first tracing will just follow right along the edges of your shapes. In other words, we're going to reproduce your design as a stroke-only design. If you've done this with a reasonably thick piece of paper underneath, you should just be able to let your pen ride right along this sort of gentle ridge of the design. Go ahead and trace out your entire design as accurately as you can. Okay, now I've got mine fully traced out. You noticed that in a couple of specific spots I was moving too fast, I goofed, and the pen kind of schmudded out on the other side. Try to avoid that. I know it's going to be, a slightly imperfect reproduction, but do your best to avoid these hiccups. Now let's move the tracing paper to a fresh area so that I can reproduce the design right next door. Tape the tracing paper down. And in this iteration, I'm not going to trace the design itself. I'm going to trace what's called the negative spaces or the non-design. And instead of tracing them out, I'm going to fill these negative spaces or these inside spaces. Now for some of you, you may only have outside space as your negative space, so kind of work around the outside. I have both inside and outside spaces. I'm going to use a sort of a mark-making motif, or just kind of a symbol to fill it up. My symbol are going to be circles, overlapping circles, big ones, small ones, and I'm going to use those small circles to fill up. Yours could be lines, could be squares, could be any kind of motif you like. Go ahead and start to fill in your negative spaces. So for my third iteration here, I'm going to make use of the filled space. Essentially I'll make use of the white lines that are here, and I'll use another motif to fill those spaces up. Now I'm only going to be working where I have white shapes. For the final version of your tracing, you're going to need your straight edge. Now, as you lay your straight edge over your piece, we're going to be making straight lines that sort of cut all the way through, but you will not draw a line where you have a shape. Let me demonstrate. So as I come in from the outside, I'll just start drawing my straight lines, and as soon as I run into my design, I skip over it, but pick up on the far side. After doing all 4 of these, we'll head back into the computer for a bit more design work. I'll see you guys in the studio.